Thanks, Devin.
Enjoy, guys. He's an astronaut. Big deal.
He's the astronaut. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Nice to be with you, Brady.
How's it going?
Good. I was on holiday, but I made a commitment a year ago to come to this, and I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. Where were you?
I was up on Bark Lake, and I'm going back to Bark Lake, which is up in the Laurentians.
So will folks have a chance to catch you after the talk a little bit?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, so you were Canada's first astronaut.
I was.
How have you seen the space industry change since then?
Enormously. It's a young industry by many standards. Canada was the third country in space back in 1962 when we built a satellite called Alouette 1 and launched it. It worked for 10 years. It was phenomenally successful. We didn't launch it. We built it. We had to go to NASA, and we formed a partnership with NASA. They launched it. We shared the data. And since then, Canada has come a long way. We're a sort of a middle power as far as space is concerned, but we have a lot of firsts to our credit. People know about our robotics. They certainly know about our communication satellites, those kinds of things. So it's been very good for Canada.
Now, what was the government's role in creating the space industry here?
The government had a crucial role. This is what you call public sector research and development. The space business is a high-risk business. There are very few companies that are ready to invest their money into the space business because there's a lot of research required. It has to be incredibly reliable technology, and because of that, the private sector is not often ready. There are some companies, some very good examples, but most of the time it's government that funds it.
Well, you know, actually in the U.S., there's a lot of private innovation going on. What do you think could be done to spur that in Canada?
Well, I think that, the conditions to create private sector involvement have to be promising in the sense that the company or the organization that's going to invest their own dollars feels that the business case is worthwhile. There are some people like Elon Musk, for example, of SpaceX, or Branson of Galactic Spaceship Galactic,
and Jeff Bezos.
And Jeff Bezos, I'm sorry, yes, as well, who are ready to take a little more risk. They've got deep pockets. They're ready to put a lot of money into it. There are not enough people in that category, and in some cases, that money is going to pay off. For example, with SpaceX, it looks like the Falcon 9 rocket is a success. It looks like the Dragon spacecraft is a success. Perhaps eventually we'll carry human beings to the International Space Station. But you have to have those deep pockets, a strong commitment towards space, and the willingness to take additional risk.
And what do you think the government's going to move in that direction here in Canada?
Well, the government in this country has a more modest budget. It tends to focus on space development from a public and utilitarian purpose. Not entirely. We do have astronauts, and that's going beyond sort of just the development of practical technology. Canada, for example, is a world leader in remote sensing technology. We have invested a huge amount in synthetic aperture radar, which is a way of observing the Earth, and it's been phenomenally successful, and we've been able to, as a result of that, pretty well map the entire planet. There are applications there in terms of processing that data to make it more useful to people, that data that comes from space, and that can be done by individuals, such as yourselves, on a more modest scale than having to invest literally hundreds of millions of dollars.
So is this data that you're talking about available online?
It isn't available publicly at the moment because it's a company called MDA that actually has that data, but it is government data as well. So, you know, if we're thinking outside the envelope, there's no reason why that data cannot be made available to young entrepreneurs who want to manipulate it and turn it into something that is useful for the consumer.
You heard it right here. So in all your time in space, you know, there must have been technologies that you wanted. What have you seen invented in the last, say, 5 years that you would have wanted?
Well, I've actually become more concerned about the state of the planet. When you go into space, and I've been around it, around our planet 450 times, have had a good look at it, I'm very concerned about, on a serious note, about our planet. I'm particularly concerned about the environment. I'm concerned about the fact that we're going from 7 billion people to 9 billion people between now and 2050. I'm concerned about the fact that we are running into some limitations in terms of people's access to water, in some cases to food. I'm concerned about the fact that we fight a lot amongst each other in the 200 countries that live on this planet. And you gain that kind of perspective when you look at planet Earth from above. And there are enormous challenges that can be solved by us to make this planet a good place to live. The person who introduced the program talked about doing good. There's an enormous amount of good that can and needs to be done so that these 200 countries on this planet, these 9 billion people that will be here during your lives, can all find a way of living together more harmoniously. And that does involve some challenges with respect to the environment, which is changing at the moment in ways that none of us have even anticipated. And it's going to put enormous pressure on us, and that pressure for fresh water, that pressure for food, all of those pressures have to be dealt with. Technology can help us.
So what are some of the areas, so you mentioned water, you mentioned food, are those opportunities for startups?
Absolutely. One of the big areas in Canada that is potentially a winner for this country is actually water management systems. We're blessed in this country. We have a huge amount of water. Other countries are actually struggling, and struggling seriously. In some cases, they don't have enough water, and in some cases, people are dying because of that. How does one manage water efficiently? In the space business, we've talked about reusing water very, very efficiently in terms of taking the water and the moisture from our breathing, the water from our urine, and reusing it. Now, that may be an extreme case, but there's no question that here in Canada, we waste enormous amounts of water. Why? Because we've got tons of it, and we as a result of that, have not thought about the fact that many other countries in this world are nowhere near as fortunate as we are in this country. But we can develop technologies on water management that can be of enormous benefit, not only here in Canada, but mostly in other countries that have a problem.
Now, who are the deep pockets that are going to help fund that work?
You know, one of the things that I ran for the leadership of the Liberal Party a little while back, and it was a good experience for me. But one of the things that I focused on a lot, because I think in this country we have good ideas. That's not the problem. The other ingredients for successful entrepreneurship are obviously having the right set of skills to develop that, and that's more complicated than many people think. And the final thing is access to capital. One of the things that the government, I believe, the federal government can and should be doing is providing incentives to those who have those deep pockets, and there are people who have those deep pockets, but are not willing to take the risk, finding a way to lower their risk level. And one of the things that I talked about when I was running for the leadership was either an angel investor tax credit for those willing to invest their money in a startup. This was a way of lowering their risk by giving them a tax credit. Or in some cases where you're talking about a company that's already publicly traded, giving a capital gains exemption to those who are prepared again to reach into those deep pockets and provide some of the funding. I think that's one of the things that we can do from a federal point of view, which will stimulate, because in many cases the ideas are there, the skills may be there, but the capital is the problem.
What do you think can be done to raise the number of CS grads? Because I was just reading, there's about 150,000 CS grads created in the U.S. every year, about 40,000 in Canada, but there's a lot more jobs that are needed.
That's one of the big challenges we have in this country, and it's one of the challenges in Canada of having what we call a federation, a confederation, because as you know, the educational system comes under provincial control. Are we turning out enough of CS graduates and in other technologies where we have a screaming need for people because with the right sets of skills? How does the federal government play a role in that? That's more problematic because each province controls their universities, their teaching institutions. They all know that they need to turn out more, but we're not turning out more. So there needs to be a solution found to that. That solution shouldn't necessarily be just by trying to increase immigration. That is part of it as well, bringing in skilled people from outside the country. But I think our universities, and I'm speaking here as a private citizen, not as a federal politician, I think that provincially we need to focus our universities more on some of the skills that are required to be more competitive, because from an innovation point of view, we're not making the grade at this point.
Mm-hmm. I also think there's a place for events like this to really try to drive the excitement and bring people into this industry.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the audience here. You're all young enough to be my children. And what I'm saying to you is that you, whether you realize it or not, are probably at your most creative period in your life. That's not to say I'm not creative anymore at my age, but I think you are at the peak of your creativity. And we need to be helping you. We need to be helping you here in Canada. And I don't want to get political here, but youth employment is a challenge in this country. And you are going that extra step of being interested in being entrepreneurs. You are the people who are eventually not only going to create successful commercial products or services, but you're also going to employ people if you grow. So you are a critical resource, and we need to be doing more to help you.
So if you were going to throw away what you're doing right now and dive into the startup scene, what would be next?
Well, from my point of view, it all starts with an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my idea is, now I'm just giving a silly example here, but can somebody invent an umbrella that doesn't turn inside out in the wind? I guarantee you it's a winner. You develop an umbrella that is lightweight, always reliable, that you can open up, that won't turn inside out, where the little things won't become weapons that can poke somebody's eye out. That's a trivial example, but we do not have a proper umbrella. Now, I mean, if we get into things like applications, the mind sees infinite possibilities, and I'm sure you see them probably much better than I do, but there are an enormous amount of things we can do, some of them more important than others. Getting back to what I was saying before, I think one of the big challenges, and one that Canada can deal with, is deals with the whole sector of the environment and greater energy efficiency, greater use of limited resources. Those are areas that are truly important, not only for Canada, but even more so for the rest of the planet.
Now, when you first went into space,
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty siloed, and there were a lot of countries kind of competing for space, and
Yes.
now there's a lot of international cooperation.
Yes.
Did you think that would ever happen?
No, I didn't. Really, when I first flew in space, the Cold War was on,
Mm-hmm.
and who would have thought that 5 years later, in 1989, Russia would be working with Canada, and thank God, because the shuttle's retired. The only way to get to space at the moment is on a Soyuz rocket out of Kazakhstan, and until such time as vehicles like the Falcon 9 are carrying people up, it's the only game in town. Another possibility are the Chinese. The Chinese are very, very ambitious. They've had several human space flights, and they are intending to be the leader. Mm-hmm. And they have the benefit of being able to focus under their government system on 10-year programs that are funded, that go towards a particular endpoint, and they don't waver from that. And so I think that in many ways, China may provide that impetus for other countries to get back in the game, because space has kind of fallen a little bit off the list of priorities for certain countries at the moment, and this will help to stimulate that competition again.
Now, did you ever participate in any international flights?
I did. Well, I mean, I went up to the International Space Station on my last flight. I went to space 3 times, and on my last flight, it was a space station building flight, and we brought up the first solar rays. These are the largest solar rays in the world. Really, truly impressive. I couldn't believe the size of them when I was in the building in California where they were built at Lockheed Martin, and then, of course, to see them erected up in space. I mean, the whole space station, if you go from one corner to the other, is about the equivalent of 1 point, I'm using Canadian football fields here, 1.56 football fields. A little bigger if you use American football fields, but anyway, it's really quite a truly, and it involves the United States, the main partner, Canada, Japan, the European Space Agency, Russia. This is an example of international cooperation such as is rarely seen from a technological point of view, because everything has to work together.
And how did that coordination happen?
It happened with a lot of goodwill, because different cultures, different space agencies bring different expertises. And by the way, we need that cooperation. It's too expensive otherwise. We need to work together. We need to say, well, you'll do this, I'll do that, and then work out very carefully the interface, because if the interface doesn't work, you're out of luck. So that kind of cooperation occurs initially on a political level, and then gets into the actual technology and the nuts and bolts and how you make it work together. All of the software on board has to be compatible, most of it anyway, because it is one integrated system.
And did you actually meet people for the first time up in space?
I did. You know, you go to the International Space Station. Chris Hadfield, for example, a Canadian, has just come down from the International Space Station.
I've heard something about him.
Chris is, of course, an extraordinary Canadian who's, I think, put Canada certainly on the map as far as astronauts are concerned. But, you know, he was up there, and during the time he was up there, they changed out crews. Now, he may have met them beforehand, but that's not always a guarantee. You could meet some people for the first time because your training schedules didn't overlap and you didn't see them before. And, of course, you're going to work together once you're up there.
What is it like meeting someone for the first time in space? It just seems to me, you know, when I meet someone internationally for the first time, we're both away from home, but to actually both be off planet just seems...
It's pretty cool. I think that in many ways it's like on Earth when two people are... But I will...
But Tang is involved, of course.
Tang, that's a separate story. We can talk about Tang. But there is one thing at the back of your mind when you do meet the people that you work with up there, and that is that you depend on them for your life. And you know, if you and I are on a flight together, I'm going to trust you so much that I'm never going to look over your shoulder. I'm never going to second guess you because I trust you. I trust you. You are my fellow crew member. So there's a very strong bond that develops between crews. It has to, and it's built up over long periods of time, even with the families of the crew members. And it has to be that way because we cannot all be experts and all be doing everything. So everybody's got their job, and everybody implicitly trusts the other person. And that can be a tough challenge when you're together for 6 months, and you know, and you really do have to learn how to work with people. And I would suggest it's the same on Earth. A successful company, it may start off being 2 or 3 people and may grow. The more successful ones are the ones where people develop that relationship between each other, where they do build up that sense of trust. It's very, very important.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Thanks, Brady.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.